a big change in ISA right now is how to move from pilots to platforms. We've created a global solar facility in India, for which we have started with Africa Solar Facility.
And then thirdly, I really hope that we can start to make progress on using solar and solar cooking to bring clean cooking to more. Thank you so much for the invitation.
And a lot of you might know her as special representative on climate for government of UK. For me, she was my boss in World Bank. So it's wonderful to actually have a fireside chat with your previous boss. I was remembering a story, Rachel, if you remember, about a coal plant in India. And I got a call from her, Ashush, what did you do? So, Rachel, thank you for all your support to clean energy. Let's first begin by asking you, solar has been such a great success story in the world right now. From where you sit, how you see the importance of clean energy and its investment? And from the UK side, what are your top 2 or 3 priorities on this transition?
So thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. And I just want to give a big shout out to the International Solar Alliance. I mean, going all the way back to Paris, I was in the room when this was announced in Paris. And look at you now. So I think that's actually a round of applause for ISA. And I think it also speaks to the changing world where India is a solution provider to the world as well as for itself, right? So solar is transformative. For somebody who's got no energy at all, that first solar lamp with a charger for your cell phone is transformative. The first time that your village gets enough solar that you can operate, a business out of your house that pulps fruit and you can keep it cool is transformative. And then the ability for solar to operate underneath the grid or alongside the grid, giving you real resilience in your energy supply, is transformative. And then, of course, running your country, as we did this year, for 85 hours with no fossil fuel anywhere in the mix is transformative. So we can look at it at the micro scale, the individual scale, all the way up to economy-wide, regional-wide scale. So for the UK, our priorities are to benefit from this extraordinary resource and the precipitously fast decreasing the price of this resource, and build it out as much as we can wherever it makes sense. Understand what the real risk is of financing it and what the perceived risk is, and closing that gap. And that's a big issue, especially for least developed countries and parts of the world where there's still large energy gaps. So really making sure that there's more and more private money flowing into renewables and into solar in particular. And then what we want to really do is drive out electrification, because it's electrification running on clean energy that really is where people start engaging with the energy system in a different way. I mean, it's one thing to install lots of renewable power, but it's another thing to completely have a different relationship to your car, to your bus, to the way you get to work, the way you get to school, completely different relationship to your dwelling, because your dwelling is now giving you energy for other things. So it's the process of electrification that is transforming people's lives on a much broader scale. And that's a story of China, which is the first electro-state. But this is going to be the story of India in the future and many, many other countries. If we look at sub-Saharan Africa, they are hyperpowers in terms of their access to wind and solar. They are hyperpowers in terms of their store of critical minerals and the things that we need in the solar energy build-out. And so what solar has done, together with other renewables, is completely change the economic geography of the world. We're committed to being a renewable energy, clean energy superpower by 2030, which means that we will be running on clean energy for more than 95% of our needs by 2030. That was God agreeing with me. And then and then that allows us to sort of transform people's lives. It's good jobs. The jobs pay better. It's good jobs. It's a future. It's clean air. It's reliable energy, and on and on and on. So we're just kind of hanging onto your coattails here.
Thank you so much. Also, thank you so much for the kind words. Rachel, let's talk a little bit on innovation. You were very kind in joining one of our discussions on Africa Solar Facility. The world needs a lot more innovation on financing structures than are currently there, which are difficult in some of the larger organizations. We are thinking of leveraging 1:10 to 20 on Africa Solar Facility. I would also like to take your attention to SIT's platform that you see. We have 19 countries that have joined an e-procurement strategy for SIT's platform. We're working together with the World Bank Group on this. How can we do a joint e-procurement, which is much bigger, has economies of scale, and attracts large-scale private sector? What's your view on what can FCDO and then with ISA to usher in a lot more innovation on financing and the platform approach that's really happening?
Yeah, so I think for small islands, one of the big issues is the size of their economies. Their economies are small. That means that they're takers rather than makers in the market. And so anything that helps them create a market together, helps them procure together, gives them additional power. And beyond solar, we're sort of very interested in the Caribbean, in building out a regional grid for geothermal and things like this, because individually, island by island, that's very difficult. You bring down the costs when you do it together. So I think this is fantastic. I think the British government's approach, which goes well beyond FCDO, because the technical expertise sits in our Department of Energy Security, our Foreign Office manages relationships, but this goes to trade and investment, it goes to our Treasury. We set up something last year called the Investor Task Force. So this is a task force which was set up by government, a partnership between our Treasury, our Finance Ministry, and our Foreign Ministry, with the City of London. And it's set up by government, but run by the private sector. So it actually runs on time. And we set aggressive timelines. And what they're doing is looking at how do we open up the domestic pools of capital in the UK and the pools of capital in the City of London so that they are more likely to flow into emerging markets and developing economies for clean energy and clean tech. And so they're coming up with all kinds of ways in which to solve this problem, because there's not enough financing coming into this. So we're already, in the international community, we already do a lot of things. For example, in Nigeria, where you're focused, in part, the UK has been involved in the creation of a credit enhancement vehicle more than 15 years ago. And that's opened up project development to domestic developers. It's opened up domestic savings to come into projects. And it's also dealt with some of the local currency guarantee issues. So the question is, well, if we did that 15 years ago, why haven't we done a credit enhancement facility everywhere? And how do we speed that up? So there is one now in Kenya, but there are more to come. The second thing that they're really looking at is the MDB, the multilateral development banks, can actually take on much more risk. If we really understood the risk that they take on now, and we really understood what a safe bet they are. And so Standard & Poor's have just done a report that came out about 3 weeks ago that showed if we re-rated the MDBs based on their actual performance, they would get a much better rating or a much easier time of it from the credit rating agencies, which would open up hundreds of billions more for financing, which we could directly plow into things that ISA and others are doing. So what we're trying to do is piece by piece, synapse by synapse, fix the financial value chain. And I think that's the right role for a country like the UK.
I can't claim that I was trying to say yes to me. Tell us a little bit about technology. And I think with storage, green hydrogen, batteries, there is just a slew of innovation and technology issues that the world is talking about. I get asked this question, whether it is on supply chain diversification from Germany, India, Japan. What do you think the world can do to get a lot of smaller countries get integrated on a lot of new technologies as well? Because that's a question that's asked us a lot more.
So it's a great question. I mean, two or three things come to mind. So first of all, we hosted earlier this year, together with IEA in London, a conference on energy security. And one big part of that was how to secure the supply chain for renewable energy in a world where it's beginning to fragment, in a world where we're having sort of conflict between major powers, and where we've got supply chain issues, or there's a shortage of supply. And what was very interesting there is that no matter how big or how small the country, everybody wanted to talk about this. Everybody wanted to talk about how to secure the supply chain and to make it work for everybody, so that those at the end of the supply chain who are mining nickel or whatever benefit from that, just as we benefit from being able to build out our solar and wind in particular faster. So I think this is increasingly becoming a major, major issue. Then I think the technology. So we have a technology partnership with China in the free trade agreement and the strategic partnership we signed with India this year. Clean tech and clean energy are a big part. And what we're trying to do there is make sure that as these technologies come to the point where they are, that they can scale and that they can be deployed, that the cost of deployment is manageable, and that we're bringing the finance together with the technology at the right pace so that it can be demonstrated. So in India, 7-10 years ago, we were investing in, or we were talking about, grid, solar, I mean, really quite basic stuff, right? Now, the conversation is how can the UK mobilize concessional capital and other capital together with private investment to come into the leading edge of India's green technology revolution. And what's that? That's electrolyzers, first generation, second generation, manufacturing. That's battery storage, new technologies for battery storage. It is around green hydrogen. And I think what's changed is that, so we're looking at deploying a special kind of capital at the leading edge of a revolution that's really underway. And we're doing that because we need India to succeed in its NDC and its goals. But it's also then a way to get India reinvesting back in the UK. So it's a virtuous circle. So, and then with China, China is driving ahead on green hydrogen really fast because it's got a market. It's got a domestic market. You have a domestic market too. I think then the kind of thing you're doing with the SIDS is you've got to build a market that has demand. That demand has to be expressed, and then the supply can flow to it. The problem in Europe and the UK is that we haven't sent demand signals for green hydrogen, and that is going to have to be fixed in the next few years. Probably be fixed with supply from India.
Thank you. I know you have to go, but let me ask you one final question, but also tell you that a big change in ISA right now is how to move from pilots to platforms. We've created a global solar facility in India, for which we have started with Africa Solar Facility. Then we are creating a Silicon Valley for solar, where cutting edge AI and digital, hopefully launch an AI summit. But we are linking all the 17 centers of excellence that we have on countries. We're talking about One Sun, One World Word Grid that was launched at Glasgow, but now it's operational. We're talking about SITs, and we are starting a new vertical on technology policy and roadmap. So it's a very exciting agenda. We are here all about implementation. But let me ask you as a concluding question, what would success look like for you in COP and next 1 year?
You mean COP31, the next one?
Well, ending with COP30 and going to COP31.
Okay.
What would success look like?
I was more interested in COP33, which might be in India. But anyway, so I think in the next year, I think the granular analysis of what finance is needed for what kinds of investment that analysis is kind of done. I think 2 or 3 days ago, CPI, who do fantastic analytic work and have worked with you, came out with a report that they did with others on what's the equity gap, what's the working capital gap, where's the debt gap, And I think the more that we understand what quality of finance is needed, in which market, for what kinds of parts of the renewable energy infrastructure, and we should see progress on that. The second thing is we're doing a lot to, as I said, close the gap between the real risk and the perceived risk. I think there's a lot more we can do so that investors understand that solar is a good bet, right? So this perceived risk of certain countries, this perceived risk of a new technology, this is now a proven technology at scale in all kinds of markets. And so we should be able to build it out even further. And then thirdly, I really hope that we can start to make progress on using solar and solar cooking to bring clean cooking to more schools, more hospitals, more individual, residences, etc. But it is absurd to me. It is offensive to me that in 2025, 2.8 billion people, women mainly, can't cook cleanly. And the cost of putting a decent plate of food in front of their children is their children's lung capacity. We have to end that.
Wonderfully said. I want to also promise to you that we are actually doing a big flagship on what would solarization of Africa based on Indian experience entail.
Fantastic.
And that would entail solar cooking. There are some solutions that must come in, but also a lot of work on reducing the perceived risk. And let me park a question with you that I'd love to have a separate discussion on solarization of agriculture.
Okay.
Africa has 4% of arable land under irrigation compared to 60% in India and 70% in China. Every African head of state is telling me this 3 million solar pump program of India, what can I do to increase my solar irrigation? I think there is such an enormous power of community empowerment, food security, job creation to solarization of agriculture. That's something I really look forward to.
So I completely agree with you, which means that here in Belém, we have to agree on a roadmap on deforestation, because if those forests become any more unstable than they are now, that water table won't be there, and we won't be able to, even with the most efficient technology, be able to do that. So it's all linked. I've got to go, I'm afraid. I've got to run to a negotiation. But I just want to say that this is exactly the kind of solution-oriented organization we need. We're grateful to you. Thank you all for coming. And I'm sorry I have to go.
Give it a round of applause, please. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure, Richard.